Jersey's own Zach Gelb.
Or maybe it's Pennsylvania. Anyhow, it's one of the two, I'm pretty sure.
The Zach Gelb Show continues
On Fox Sports 920, The Jersey.
4:17 is the time right now in the Princeton Orthopedic Associates studios. Zach Gelb Show on a Tuesday. Number, as always, 609-919-9200. We do have the Rutgers-Michigan ticket giveaway coming up right at the conclusion of this interview with Geoff Mosher. Geoff, of course, Eagles insider for 97.5 The Fanatic and also writes for philasports.com. And Geoff is kind enough to give us a few minutes right now on the Zach Gelb Show. Geoff, appreciate a few minutes. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Zach, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on. So expectations have completely changed for the Philadelphia Eagles. Right now, they are the best team in the NFC East. I could not say that I foreseen this going into the season, but things have changed with the Philadelphia Eagles, and it's all because of the Wentz wagon. Where were your expectations going into the year, and where are they now for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Well, I mean, boy, when you talk about expectations going into the year, you have to ask me at what month was I doing my expectations, because so much has changed. You know, when Sam Bradford was the quarterback, I didn't think very highly of the offense. I didn't think that they were going to be very good. I thought depth at a lot of positions, including wide receiver and cornerback and running back, was going to be an issue. So I always thought that they were kind of that 6 to 8 win team, maybe if everything broke right for them, 9 wins at most. When Carson Wentz took over, I don't think my expectations changed all much.
Same.
I thought he was going to be a fairly good running back, but it was still not anything more than in that 6 to 8 range.
Yeah, I was in the same boat. I didn't see the Eagles having this much success out of the gate. Now, they do have a tough schedule after the Lions game. There really is no easy game on the schedule. So I'm just wondering, with Carson Wentz, he's been so impressive, the footwork, the leadership, the ball placement, and also making these not-so-talented receivers around him having at least one reception for 9 players. What's impressed you the most, though, with Carson Wentz?
Really, more than the throws and more than, as you mentioned, you know, finding some life in these wide receivers. I think the most impressive thing has been, you've basically seen him running a lot of spread formations, empty backfield, no huddle offense, and having that kind of mastery over a playbook and an offense to where from your first start, even though you missed all of training camp or most of it, and even though you come from a small level school, he's basically been given the autonomy to change the calls of scrimmage, which he's done very well, and lead and direct a complex offense, a West Coast offense, which, you know, I'd have to go back to Peyton Manning's rookie year and check that out, and Andrew Luck. I don't remember a rookie with such little experience and polish having been given this much responsibility. Basically handed the keys to the offense and saying, run with it, and we'll do no huddle, we'll do spread formations, empty backfield, and him just being able to adapt to that and almost seem perfectly suited to it when he didn't even run that kind of an offense in college, to me is staggering.
When do you think the Eagles brass knew they had something special?
Well, I know that a couple of weeks after the Senior Bowl, I had gotten some tips from some sources that Doug Peterson had really fallen in love with Carson Wentz and was going to make a really strong play to get him. And then that's kind of, you know, weeks later is when all the analysts like Mike Mayock and Kuiper came out and they really started giving Carson Wentz heady praise and comparing him to some great athletes. So I knew that Doug had seen something in him. You just didn't know to the level of what he saw. And clearly he not just saw a great quarterback from the college level on tape, but in his meetings with Carson, he clearly saw somebody who had the intellect, almost a brilliant mind, a savant for quarterbacking, a guy who could pretty much handle any kind of workload that you give to him. And that's what we've seen so far from Carson. I have to imagine that he saw that a lot at the Senior Bowl, and then in their meetings, they went out to Fargo, have a dinner with him. Jeffrey Lurie was there. Howie Roseman was there. And in just those meetings, I have to think that he saw something beyond the physical measurables, something in the intellect there that really made him want to have him as his quarterback.
I hate to break this news to Eagles fans, but it is the inevitable. Carson Wentz one day will throw an interception. I'm curious, how do you believe he will respond to that adversity, Geoff?
Well, I mean, we don't have much of a resume to judge him on as far as responding to adversity. Obviously, he was at a winning program at North Dakota State that won before him and has been winning without him even. And then in his first 3 games, they've been all blowout wins. I don't even know if they've had a deficit in any of the games. Maybe if it was just 3 points. So I have to think, though, just the fact that he's been able to, he wins his first start against Cleveland, wins his first road start against Chicago, and then wins the first quote-unquote real test of his career and convincingly against Pittsburgh. I'd have to think after doing that, if you throw one pick, your world's not going to be caving in. It certainly seems like this guy's got the composure, the poise, and the gumption to be able to kind of rally the team back if he has a bad play here and there.
I know fantasy owners are loving what they're seeing out of Carson Wentz as Geoff Mosher joins us right now, Eagles insider for 97.5 The Fanatic, and you could read him for PhillySports.com. I have to ask you about Dorial Green-Beckham. I didn't love the move when they made it. I thought it was a low-risk, high-reward, but I didn't expect much out of Dorial Green-Beckham. How do they get him going in this offense? Because his size is conducive to a good threat in the red zone.
Yeah, no, he certainly has physical skill. When they traded for him, I thought it was kind of like that same old-style Eagles move of trying to get somebody else's cast off. And my thought was, if Tennessee doesn't want him, why is he so attractive to the Eagles? But it's a no-brainer because they gave up an offensive tackle that they weren't going to keep anyway. What I felt all along that they needed to do was basically sit him and let him see the slot that they were throwing out there at wide receiver and make him wonder, why can't I get on the field if those guys can? And I thought that would be kind of a way, an admonishing way of making him overcome some of the mistakes that he was making in his career before that, whether it was in Tennessee or in college. Now, I didn't realize that the Eagles were only going to keep 4 wide receivers going into the year, so they really couldn't bury him on the bench. They needed to use everybody, but they really have kind of done what I was advocating, and that's just kind of start him off really low on the totem pole. I mean, he's been out there, he's probably averaging 15 snaps a game, and that says a lot because he's probably physically their most talented wide receiver. So it seems like they're trying to start him off very low and build him up, only giving him certain plays, as you mentioned, inside the red zone, certain slot plays, not putting too much on his plate, which would be, to me, repeating mistakes that maybe some other teams have made. So I have a feeling that, they've had the bye week now. He'll probably see a little bit more action against the Lions, and they will incrementally try to build him up at his pace and at their pace that they're comfortable with, so it doesn't become overloading and then you see those mistakes that he's been making in the past.
All right, let's get to Nigel Bradham. On the field, I've been very impressed. Off the field, not so much. Already had one incident. Doug Peterson probably told the team during the bye week to have fun, but be safe and don't do anything that would risk the franchise and do anything stupid that would create negative headlines. Nigel Bradham, not a good look after the first offense, and this is offense number 2. How much longer do the Eagles put up with Nigel Bradham and his antics off the field?
Yeah, it depends on how they feel, their level of concern over these incidents. One is a fight in South Beach where the story is that Cabana boy or whatever offended his either girlfriend or wife and started a fight. An immature thing, no doubt, because it's a fight and you're a professional athlete. The second thing is similar in that it's not the crime of the century. Nobody, even the police said, yes, he had a loaded gun in his bag that he was trying to get through TSA, and he said it was a mistake. He showed his permit that he has a license for the gun. He just forgot that he had left it in the bag. Again, it's not, is he going out? The police said there was no criminal intent there. They didn't see anything. They just saw a guy who made a dumb mistake. So it's 2 dumb mistakes. It's, again, is he going out there and doing some of the other things, like hitting people, hitting a woman or drugs? No, it's not like that, but nonetheless, it is still 2 strikes against him from a legal standpoint, and I have to think that he'll be having a stern lecturing from front office, and you have to wonder how the NFL count these 2 against the personal conduct policy because they obviously have to wait for the results of both to come out, but it is 2 arrests.
I don't own a gun. I have shot a gun before, but I just don't understand how someone just says, oh, yeah, I forgot that there was a gun in my bag. That's the part of the story that I just don't get.
Yeah, I agree with you, but then again, sometimes I travel to other states, especially rural ones, the down south ones, where gun ownership and carrying is a lot more prominent than it is here in Jersey. And it boggles my mind how the different cultural and different thinking about it. And, even states that have open carry laws kind of boggle my mind. But that's just because I'm a Northeast guy in my life, and I can't imagine people just being allowed to carry a gun all around however they want it. But there is a big cultural difference in that regard and where you're from. And I think Nigel is from down south. I'd have to recheck. But again, I agree with you on the level of this is a stupid thing. I mean, you got to be more responsible.
All right, let's get to another off-the-field issue. Lane Johnson. What are you hearing about Lane Johnson's appeal?
Well, I know it's an ongoing thing. He was in court today, or appellate court, whatever you want to call it today, and I don't know how long it will take. I imagine that it will take at least 24 hours, and, we'll see what happens if not. So it seems like he might be available for the Lions game, but probably after that. So it really stinks because, and although there was a report today that they may consider putting their rookie that they drafted in, I think, the 5th round, and I can't pronounce his name.
Neither can I. I know who you're talking about, though.
We call him the Big V, right? We're going to call him the Big V. There was a report, I think, from Ed Werder that Big V would play right tackle, and that would essentially keep Alan Barber at left guard. And I kind of think that's a good idea because I didn't like the idea of having to move Alan Barber to right tackle and then play either Sayamalu or Wisniewski at left guard because now you weakened yourself at 2 positions. So I like the way Alan Barber is playing at left guard, and if the Big V is ready to play right tackle, then it makes sense to do that. But that only if they feel he's ready.
So with Lane Johnson, I don't believe from the start it was a smart decision to blast the NFLPA. Him blasting the NFLPA, how do you think that affects this whole situation in the appeal process?
Yeah, I didn't think that was the best decision on his part either. I mean, I understood what he was saying. I think there's probably a way you can say that the system is flawed without basically throwing everybody under the bus but yourself. He's definitely responsible for what he puts into his body. So it was not to me, it wasn't the best. It wasn't the best way to say that there's a problem. And I do think that there's a problem in the system if people can buy something and it's check. You get a check mark on it saying it's kind of approved, but then there's also that disclaimer that we may approve it, but we might be wrong. That just seems like not the right kind of system. I think reform is needed. I just don't know that Lane Johnson went around the best way of advocating for it.
And the real unfortunate part about this, not only do you lose an offensive lineman that is playing as your best offensive lineman right now, but everyone is concerned about Carson Wentz and his health and sliding and going out of bounds. Losing your starting right tackle is not good for the quarterback either in Carson Wentz.
No, it's not. I will say this, though. The one good thing about Carson Wentz so far, and another thing that kind of puts him light years ahead of most rookie quarterbacks I've seen, is that he does get rid of the ball very quickly. I think he's been averaging getting rid of that ball in less than 3 seconds, and a lot of that is because of the offense that Doug Peterson has designed, a lot of spread formations, as I mentioned, an empty backfield. And, when you got empty backfield, you got to get rid of the ball quickly because teams are going to come after you. So Carson has been really smart enough and handled and making the pre-snap diagnosis to know where he wants to go with the ball. And that's kind of helped the offensive line because they haven't had to hold their blocks as long. So that's been a bonus for them and probably made them look a little bit better.
I love this defense. I love Jim Schwartz's personality and how it resonates with Philadelphia. Has anything surprised you, though, with this defense so far through the first few games of the season?
Well, I think Jim doesn't get enough credit for being a tactician. When people think of Jim Schwartz's defenses, they think of the defensive line that just goes right after the quarterback. And certainly this team is doing that too. And, watching the team on tape, I watch every game, go through the All-22. I myself have even been surprised at times at his mix of man and zone and man that looks like zone and zone that looks like man on specific plays in the back end and the secondary that have really worked well for them. So I credit him for being more than just a guy who knows how to motivate linemen to hit quarterbacks. I think I've seen him design some pretty good schemes that have worked against some pretty good offenses, especially, having to deal with Antonio Brown and that Steelers offense. And even, that second game against the Bears on Monday Night Football where they had to deal with Alshon Jeffrey, and we know that they're very weak at the quarterback level. He has been able to come up with, A, the rush, and B, the back-end schemes to be able to compensate for the fact that they are very mediocre at cornerback, and I might even be putting that nicely.
I still pinch myself because I don't understand how they kept Antonio Brown and Big Ben Roethlisberger out of the end zone. And then you see this past weekend, Big Ben goes up against Andy Reid and just lights them up. But you have the Lions coming up this week. What stands out to you about that Lions offense against the Eagles defense? Well,
I'm anxious to actually start watching the Lions on tape because I don't understand why they've been so bad.
Right.
It seems like in 2 of their 4 games they've been able to score, and in the other 2 games they've been shut down. But those teams that they haven't been able to score against aren't very good. Like Tennessee was one of them, so that was kind of surprising to me. All I know is no matter what, they still have some pretty good weapons. They've got Golden Tate. They have Marvin Jones, who I think is a nice receiver. Matt Stafford has a great arm. I know they're banged up in a lot of areas on defense, but they definitely have weapons that can at least test that Eagles secondary more. I have a feeling, Zach, that as the tape on the Eagles has grown here in 3 games, that more teams are going to start respecting that D-line pressure and maybe keeping more tight ends and running backs in the block. And that might give the quarterback a little bit more time to find those weapons down the field. So this will be a real true test as the weeks go by to see if this secondary can handle, to hold their coverage when the front 4 is getting chipped and beaten up at the line of scrimmage.
Now, before we let you run, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, and I don't believe the fans actually understand how tough this schedule is from here on out after the Lions. You have at the Redskins, Vikings, at the Cowboys, at the Giants, Falcons, Seahawks, Packers, at the Bengals, Redskins, at the Ravens, Giants, and then the Cowboys. Where do you predict the Eagles' first loss to be if I had to put you on the spot?
It's going to be, you just mentioned it. 3 of their next 4 games are road games, right? So I don't think it's going to be the Lions, although nothing would surprise me. I think that Washington game at FedEx Field could definitely be a loss. It's the more they win, the law of averages is going to kick in at some time.
Now, who would have thought, though, Sam Bradford and the Eagles mentioned in the same sentence as undefeated? It's crazy what's going on now. If you would have told me that a few months ago, it would have been a completely different meeting, Geoff.
How do you think Chip Kelly is feeling? The team that the guy left behind is undefeated, and the quarterback he brought in and then all of a sudden fell out of love with was undefeated. So,
you know what? I can't feel bad for Chip because I didn't like him in Philadelphia. But Geoff, we appreciate the time today. Get those kids fed that I hear in the background. Get them some good meals tonight.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying.
Best stay-at-home dad in the business, Eagles insider for 97.5, and does a tremendous job covering the Eagles for Phyllis Sports. That's Geoff Mosher. Geoff, appreciate the time.
All right, Zach, thanks.